Welcome to episode 17 of the Existential Stoic podcast. Today's episode, we're going to talk about self-love, how to be your own best friend.
Ooh, self-love.
Yeah, I am Randy. I'm joined today with Danny.
Hey, Randy.
Hey, Danny. So, today's episode was just something that came up and figured, yeah, we should talk about this because this is an important topic.
Yeah, self-love is an important topic. I think you see a lot of times when I look at motivational stuff, or I look at like self-help stuff, a lot of times they talk about confidence or they talk about relationship building. And I honestly think that all starts with self-love. Like really, like your sense of confidence, your ability to be in healthy relationships, all of that really comes back to you, how you treat yourself, right? And your expectations for how to be treated.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because our external world reflects a lot of our internal world.
Yeah, it does, right? I mean, our external world is also, another way you could say that too is like we talked about this with like the negativity loop or the positivity loop, right? When you interpret something a certain way and hold certain values and beliefs, they will be reflected in the world because those are the principal ways in which you are going to interpret the world. Yeah. You will make them, you will make it be realized in the world and manifested, right?
Yeah, and I think this is an especially important topic because it's something new. Like, it hasn't existed throughout all time where people hated themselves.
Yeah.
I remember there was a story about the Dalai Lama when he was giving a speech, and somebody asked, how do I love myself because I hate myself? Like, how can I cultivate compassion for myself because I hate myself? And he had to have it translated for him over and over again because he just couldn't comprehend how somebody couldn't love themselves.
That you could actually like come to hate who you are, hate yourself, your abilities, all that, right?
Yeah, it was just something so far outside of his reality and outside of the reality of the world that he grew up in. But in America, growing up in America, it's pretty common. People.
Oh yeah. Self-hate is a common phenomenon in this country. I think most of us struggle with it. I would definitely say most of us struggle with it, right? At least at some time in our lives. Where do you think? I guess let's start there, right? Where do you think self-hate? At least let's talk about our perspective, right? Our country. Where does self-hate come from, do you think? Or how is it what's the catalyst for it, if we could identify maybe some? What's your thought on this?
Ooh, I think it comes from a faulty mental model. And it comes from a mental model of, if this, then I'll be happy. And also that there's some end goal that's right and where you're not there is wrong. So it kind of comes from, I would think it comes from the indoctrination in the school system where we're taught that there's good and bad, but also that if you're not good right now, then you're bad, which doesn't make sense.
I see that a lot, yeah. The idea that if I'm not excellent at something immediately, then it's not worth pursuing or it's not for me. And so you miss out on a lot of things that could be positive, could be good for you, right? Over time, you miss out on that, on the ability to even have like a work ethic, really, right? Because their expectation is immediacy. And I think that is part of it. Expectations, I think, part of it. The indoctrination, I think you're absolutely right. The way we view things in this culture greatly influences us. We have all these self-concepts we apply, and a lot of them do have to do with good and bad, right? They have connotations of being better or worse, good and bad, you're a failure or you succeed. And that sort of thinking, there's no middle ground, because life really is the middle, right? It's in between. You're rarely going to find the extremes in life.
But we're subject to the extremes so much more often nowadays. Like if you think about when the Dalai Lama grew up in the Himalayas, 70 years ago, he grew up in a monastery and he probably interacted with less than 100 people in his whole entire childhood.
Yeah, day to day, yeah.
Whereas nowadays, we may not interact with 100 people, but we have news, we have social media, we have all these other things showing us the most exceptional cases ever of these extremes that would just never happen in reality. You see, yeah.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, right? Yeah, you're right. Because, you have these extremes that we're getting thrown in our face all the time. And I think the other side of that too, that, that really helps clarify it, is that everything is thought about in terms of money. That's become the universal value. So if you think about it, it's, I've fallen into this trap myself. There was a time where I was depressed. My student loans were, causing a lot of fear and basically making me think very negatively of my future. I had a lot of debt, and I kind of thought of myself as a failure because I didn't have all the money that I needed now. And that kind of valuation, that a good person has money, to be successful is to have money, it basically nixes so many other ways of being alive and living your life and having a fulfilling life. It makes it all reducible to one thing,
Yeah.
which it's absolutely not.
And going further on what you're talking about there with it all being about money, most of the marketing nowadays that's done is you are not good enough, buy this. Like, just as an experiment, next time you're watching TV, you're watching commercials, look at the commercials. Every single commercial is, you're not good enough as you are right now, buy this, it'll make you feel better.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, Epicurus talked about natural desires and natural pleasures and artificial desires or vain, you know? And it's interesting because whenever I teach that in my class, I always talk about advertising, right? Because the goal of advertising is to make you think you need something that you don't need and that probably didn't exist before. And so it is literally the definition of a vain or artificial desire. It's a societal sort of, it's created by society. You think you need it because of society, but in reality, you don't need it to live a good life or a pleasant life. You know, what he thought of as natural desires were ones that we need, like your basic sustenance, mental, physical health, lots of sex. Yes, always, naturally. That's important. It makes you feel good about yourself. Somebody loves you. You know? But yeah, no, and I think that's important. You know, I think we have a hard time figuring out what is really valuable. Because when everything's talked about in terms of monetary value, we're not talking about its value to me relative in my life, right? Like, you know, I could go for a walk and that could be extremely valuable, but I'm not going to get any money from it. It's not going to make me wealthier, right? And so should I pursue it? I mean, this is the kind of problem I think a lot of us face, and this is why we start to hate ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's a very salient issue right now, self-love, because it's so easy to be indoctrinated into self-hate.
It is.
So taking the time to cultivate self-love, and I think that it's important in the title that we did, how to be your own best friend, because a lot of people, we treat ourselves in a way we would never treat anyone else.
Yeah.
Anyone else.
Never. The things we say to ourselves, I mean, could you imagine saying that to somebody else?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you get knocked out.
Yeah. Like Danny and I are really good friends, and sometimes I look at the things that I'm saying to myself and I'm like, I would never say that to him. What am I doing?
Yeah, right? That's a good, I like that because it's a good model, right? Like, when you get in that mindset, would I say this to my best friend? Would I critique them this way if I thought they were doing something wrong? It would be crazy. I would never say that to you. Like the things I say to myself. Like, you know, like you're a loser, you're a failure, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, really why, you know? And I think that's the issue. That's a good point.
Yeah, and you can take that and you can say, well, if I needed to help Danny with this, how would I go about doing it?
That switch of perspective. Yeah, I think that's really important when we're talking about this. But yeah, I like the titles, you know, how to be your own best friend. Especially, I was thinking about that too right now. You know, I read a lot of stuff because, you know, these trying, uncertain times with the pandemic.
Which trying, uncertain
right?
times? I thought that was over in 2020.
I thought so too, but apparently, you know, things are a process and they don't end immediately when the day changes.
Oh,
I know.
Kind of like life. There's not a clear defined end. It's just one thing after another. Jeez.
Even when you get to that goal, it doesn't mean everything changes.
Macrocosm. I'm telling you, man.
It's amazing. I know. It all comes together. But yeah, so I was thinking about that because in these trying, uncertain times, you know, the pandemic has in a lot of places gotten worse. You know, there's a lot of fear. It's a lot of uncertainty with politics, and we're also isolated. And I think, you know, a lot of us are extra hard on ourselves when we're alone, and especially for prolonged periods of time because, you know, we might have interaction on social media. That's not the same, though, as real person to person. No, it's not.
I mean, for social creatures, loneliness is a big problem. Like, look at one of the biggest punishments they can do in prisons. Solitary confinement. It's like one of the most cruel and unusual punishments you can get. Putting you by yourself. And look at what everybody's done nowadays. They have to be by themselves. And
not to mention, too, you know, they've done study after study has shown that solitary confinement has severe mental ramifications on your mental health. Yeah. And I think, you know, so even more than ever, we need to be our own best friends. We need to learn to be compassionate with ourselves. We need to learn to be more gentle and also to laugh at ourselves more. I think that's the other flip side of this is a lot of times we talk about, you know, how do we develop self-love? How do we, you know, we talk about compassion. We talk about being gentle. I think also just laughing at ourselves. We are foolish sometimes. Not taking ourselves so goddamn seriously all the time is a great also, you know, point to make because it can help us really start to change our perspective and think differently.
It's part of humanity, making mistakes, doing stuff wrong. making mistakes again.
Yeah, literally, right? And we learn from it. I mean, that's how we learn, that's how we grow, right? That's how we develop.
Yeah, but this ideal of perfectionism oftentimes can lead to self-hate.
You know, we were talking about this actually right before we started recording. I mentioned to you, you know, that like I love doing this because we're putting in the effort to make ourselves better. And I had read something earlier this week or something that said something along the lines that, you know, a good person is someone who's trying. You know, essentially, like, as long as you're trying to be better, you're trying to improve, you are improving because you're putting some work in. So just listening to this podcast, right, is a step forward in that direction. Just thinking about it is a step forward because at least you're taking the time to be aware of it. And I think that's important.
Yeah, and philosophy is one of the oldest arts out there, one of the oldest things that people do to improve their life.
Yeah, it is. It's the oldest discipline, technically, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, not the oldest profession.
Well, no, well, yeah, that too, I guess. Yeah, no, it's not.
That's a different one.
That is, isn't it?
Yeah. So, yeah, so cultivating self-love. I think probably the best thing is, you know, there's a lot of times in life we're held back by our own thoughts. And people say it was either Confucius or Henry Ford who said, he who thinks he can or cannot, either way he's right.
Yeah.
And so they say that people who are growth-minded, instead of saying I can or I can't, will say how can I?
Oh, I like that.
So a very important method to become better at self-love is just starting to ask the question, which is a lot of what philosophy is, like the Socratic method. Just asking questions. How can I love myself? How can I treat myself like my best friend?
You know what I like about that too? Because that really, by focusing on the question, you leave open the possibility that there's probably a ton of ways you can go about this, right? And that there might be ways that are unique to the individual that will help them greatly. And so the question asking is crucial to get to the goal. It always is, right? And I like that, you know, it is true. Philosophy is about asking questions, tough questions. And, you know, questions we don't often think about and learning how to ask them. And I think that, you know, doing that will improve your life because you're thinking about life. You know, it was like, you know, one of the oldest quotes that people always point to, right, is, you know, the unexamined life is not worth living, right? The idea that if you're just going through the motions, if you're just living your life, conforming to society, not thinking about your quality of life, not thinking about your life, not being self-aware, you're not really alive. Is it a worthwhile life? Because that's what it means, right? What makes a life worthwhile? We're rational beings. Reflection, thinking about it.
Yeah. And also what you were touching on there is that we'll have, you know, for when you ask that question, how can I love myself? I'm going to get a different answer than you're going to get.
Yeah.
And we're going to get different answers than all of our listeners are going to get. And so while we can dogmatically tell you, you need to do your affirmations in the morning, stand in front of the mirror saying, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me.
Yeah.
You know, you can do that stuff. But honestly, you're going to get different answers and you're going to be able to adapt it to you, which is really...
I think that's a great place to, I think that's a great place to start because we can come up with some stuff now and it'll be good guidelines maybe.
Yeah.
But nothing is concrete and absolute and set in stone.
But
right?
our answers are the correct ones.
They always are. I mean,
Clearly.
that goes without saying.
Clearly.
I mean, obviously that's true.
Yeah. So let's talk about our own self-love practices. Do you have any practices in your daily life that you would consider self-love? I mean, masturbation aside.
Well, yeah, that's obvious. Come on. Let's not. We all know that's the case, but no. So, yeah, for self-love, you know, it's interesting. I think for me personally, you know, I had been struggling a lot with like depression and stuff. So I think for me personally, a lot of my, I guess I would call it my self-love routine has to do with really being aware and identifying the moods I'm in so that I don't let my imagination, I don't let my fear and my limits overcome me and, you know, essentially become panicked and stuff, right? So a lot of it for me is just trying to cultivate more self-awareness, and with that self-awareness, more self-understanding. Because I really think, you know, honestly, like, to love yourself, I think, you know, when you really think about it, there's nothing wrong with any of us. I mean, because we're all different, we all fail, we all make mistakes, and we also all do great things. Human beings are creative beings, we do amazing stuff. The world's literally limitless, right, in significant ways. So I think a big part of it is just understanding yourself. And when you understand yourself, you start to also understand the things that do get in your way, the things that do block you, the things that do cause you fear, and you can start to kind of laugh at them and see them for what they are, you know? And like realize that they're not real. It's you causing it. And that is kind of funny in a weird cosmic way, you know? And I think that has really helped me. Like, so trying to cultivate self-understanding through self-awareness has been a big step in my sort of self-love regiment, I guess.
Yeah, I really like that one, how you say learning to recognize those patterns or those triggers or whatever it is that sets you off, because that's the first step in the cascade that just turns into something terrible.
Yeah.
But learning to catch that first step, that makes such a huge difference. That's something, when you said that, I saw some things in my life that the earlier that I can catch those things, then I can start to recognize, okay, what are the thoughts going on? What are the processes going? What are the underlying beliefs that I think are true that are causing this?
Yeah, and going back to the point you made before, right? Because once you identify it, you can then ask the question of how can I X,
Yes.
right? How can I get through this? How can I change my perspective? How can I overcome this? How can I think about this differently? All those important questions that get us to a place where...
How do I know that's true? This is something that's so big for me.
Yeah.
How do I know? Okay, so like I'll be at work and I'll say good morning to somebody and they sneer at me instead of saying good morning back. And all of a sudden I make it into mean that I did something wrong or they hate me or there's something wrong with me. And this is all this whole like subconscious train of thought. And before I know it, my day's ruined it and I don't even know what happened. But like being able to catch that and saying hi to them sneering instead of saying hi back. And then I catch that thought that, oh, something's wrong with me. Or, oh, they're angry at me. And then I ask, how do I know that's true? How do I actually know why they sneered at me?
They could have been sneering at their cell phone, right? They could have saw something on social media.
Maybe they didn't hear me.
Yeah.
Maybe they're having a terrible day. Maybe they just got into a fight with their spouse or significant other. Like there's all these different things. And I've started also looking back on those events when I was clearly wrong. Like these episodes where people sneered at me and I thought they were upset at me. And then later on that day or the next day, things are totally fine. And I look back at those events and I say, this was a wrong interpretation that I did in my brain. So when these things come up in the future, I really need to investigate them. But it all starts with what you were saying, with noticing those triggers.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that too, and thinking back to when you were wrong, because it is hilarious. We're wrong so often in this interpretation because, you know, it's true. Especially, and I will say, especially when we have negativity already and a negative attitude and a pessimistic attitude, we will interpret things that way. We are wrong so often, especially in our interactions with others. Because, you know, it's funny, we almost forget other people have a whole inner world.
It's so hard to comprehend that other people have their own life going on.
Yeah, exactly. They have their own world that they live in. And we forget that. We think of them as sort of like, you know, they're here now and they're reacting to me.
Yeah, they're in my world.
Yeah, exactly, right? We think they're reacting to me specifically. We forget that they could be reacting to any number of things. They could be having a bad day. You know, there could be any number of things. I mean, they could be having a bad day, and when you say hi, if you say it too jovially, you know, happy, they're just like, ugh, you know, like, and it has nothing to do with you. It's just, you know, whatever. But it is funny. We're wrong so often, and I'm glad you said that, because when we think about that, it really can help us start to think about, you know, how am I interpreting the world? Yeah. Why am I jumping to these conclusions? Yeah. And also, why do I care?
Yeah, why would you care? And how can you interpret the world to your benefit? Like, one thing that I've always done, some people get really pissed off when other people cut them off in traffic. They completely lose their shit.
Oh, God, yeah. They do.
I don't know when it happened, like, but when I was a child, somebody was just like, well, what if they just have really bad diarrhea?
Yeah.
And that was something that I could relate to, because I know what it feels like to have really bad diarrhea.
And in the car.
And I'm like, you know what? Maybe they just have really bad diarrhea. And I let it go like that. But it's like, how can you tailor your beliefs to benefit you?
Well, you know what I think too, we're hitting on here too, because the traffic example is so good. I mean, I've seen people literally I used to commute at least an hour each way every day for years. And I mean, I would see people smash their steering wheel, lay on the horn, yell out the window, you know, like curse words and shit. And like, it's funny because what we're doing in these moments is we are immediately interpreting that action as against us.
Like a trespassing against us.
Yeah, right? Like they're crossing over the line into our world, and they're doing it intentionally. When a lot of times they are not. Like, you know, especially driving now. You think about driving now, I see so many cases where people just aren't fucking looking. They're on their phones. Now, granted, that is their fault. And I do get angry at that because I don't want to be hurt because of somebody's lack of attention. But that's not an intentional act. And these people interpret it intentionally. And I think that is an important thing to start thinking about. Am I interpreting the world as against me? Am I interpreting other people as going out of their way to harm me? And now maybe they are, and if they are, that's something you should consider, obviously. But when it comes to self-love, I think part of this is understanding how are we interpreting the world in a way that it's infringing upon my ability to live a good life, to love myself, to interact with others, you know?
Yeah. So I want to transition this a little bit.
Okay.
Just like a little tweak, because we're talking about our interpretation of the world. And the episode of the show today is self-love. And I think with self-love, we can also receive love from the world and from the universe. And so there's what happens, there's our interpretation of it, and then there's the consequences of that interpretation. And so we always have choice over our interpretation of it.
We do.
And so, but the actual growth is recognizing that whatever's happening right now, I have the ability to interpret this as the universe loves me. But I need to actually put in the effort to interpret it that way. It's not just something that's given to me. Okay, I have to put in some work, some effort, but I can do that and then realize that the universe loves me and I'm part of the universe, and so I love me.
You know, I like that too, because you know what you're pointing out too is that it takes effort to change our perspective and our interpretation towards self-love. It does. And I think, you know, one of the sort of traps of negativity, self-hate, and really pessimistic attitudes is that they are easy because
Yes.
It's easy to believe everything's against you. It's easy to blame the world for everything. It's easy because you take no responsibility. It's easy because it's somebody else's fault. You're not, you know, you didn't perform bad on your test because you didn't study. You performed bad because somebody, you know, insulted you earlier and that was on your mind and that confused you, right? Or
The professor didn't tell you this would be on the
Yeah.
test. They made it too hard.
exactly, right? So it, you know, or, you know, it's like all these things that we blame the world for, that's really, I think, motivates negativity. And so the thing about self-love, and I think the thing about positivity, and the thing about confidence, is taking ownership for your life, taking responsibility, and holding yourself accountable. And that's why it's so fucking hard. Because it is really hard to own up. Like to say to yourself, maybe I'm interpreting this wrong. Maybe it's my fault for just assuming that's the case, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe I didn't prepare enough. Or maybe I need to grow, you know?
I love how you say that it's easy, because that's literally what it is. There's this book that I'm listening to called Flourish by Martin Seligman, and he talks about success in life, academically, financially, pretty much any endeavor. Success can be 100% predicted by time on task,
Yeah.
meaning effort, meaning the time you actually dedicate to it, meaning that it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's a 100% predictor for success is time on task. And so learning self-love actually can be taught by time on task. And this is something that Danny and I were just talking about. It's a practice that he taught me about from the book on small delights.
Yeah, by Ross Gay, yeah.
Yeah, so every day, just taking the time to notice the delights in your day. And I actually started painting some watercolors with this too.
I love that addition. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Fantastic. At the end of the year, I'm going to have this whole book,
Yeah.
this whole color book of my year. And so, but by doing that, what we both recognize is by taking the time, by putting in the effort and the time on task to notice the good things of our day, we're noticing many more good things in our day.
Yeah, that's the great thing about it is the task is to identify one small delight, one small joy a day. And these are little things. I was just telling Randy before we started, you know, the other day I saw my neighbor brought his dogs out and I was cracking up because the one dog just looked so ready to go for a walk, so happy. You could see it in his face. And that was my small delight for the day. But noticing that one thing, you start to become more self-aware of the delights and the pleasures in your life. And I will tell you, it's hard to decide which one to even jot down at the end of the day. There's so many.
Yeah, it's crazy because you're just sitting here and you're like, ooh, this is really nice. Will this be my small delight?
Yeah.
Ooh, this is really nice. Will it be this one?
And it's funny, before I started this, like, I could have gone through the day and at the end of the day been like, nothing good happened. And now it's like, oh my God, there's so many awesome, funny, joyous, great little things that happened today.
Yeah, because your brain's a computer and it will find whatever you're looking for. If you're looking for the disappointment, you'll find it. But if you're looking for the good, you'll start finding more of it.
I'm glad you said that, right? Because I think, self-love is the same thing. You need to look for it. You need to be aware of it. You need to want it. And I think, and it's really important to note that it is hard. You have to work at it. Everything good in life takes time and effort. Everything worthwhile takes time. But I think once you put the effort in, you get paid back in dividend. I mean, it's amazing how much better life becomes because, self-love, when we always talk about these things separate. I mentioned this earlier, right? Self-love, confidence, positivity, but they're really all interconnected. I think when you work on one, you invariably work on others. You can't be positive in life and hate yourself. It's impossible. It doesn't work. So I think working on self-love is kind of like that foundational element. It's like the whatever the hell they call it on a bridge, that thing that holds it up.
Yeah,
that
thing. The foundation.
Yeah, foundation, right? Yeah, it supports everything else. If you cultivate self-love, I think you really start to cultivate a better, more fulfilling life.
Yeah. And just from what we've touched on already, here's a practice that you can do every day that'll multiply your self-love by a lot. So, first, what Danny said, recognizing when you're doing or saying or thinking something that's not loving yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay? And then take a look back over the past week. So first you notice that you're not loving yourself. Then in that moment, you actually correct your thought. Because in that moment, you're thinking, I don't love myself. Something's wrong with me. I don't love myself. Then take a look back over the past day or week or month or however far back you have to go back to find an instance of when you have loved yourself.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Because all of a sudden you're correcting yourself saying, hey, I have this pattern of self-love, of self-hate.
Yeah.
But that's not true. I have actual proof in my life that I love myself. And then, once you have those instances, say, how can I create more of that self-love in my life?
I really like that too, because, looking back on our past, we talked about this before with challenges in life and overcoming challenges. You're here now. You've overcome challenges already. You've overcome a lot. Whether you're listening to this podcast and you're 15 or 75, you've overcome challenges in your life. So you can overcome more, just like you've probably loved yourself in the past. Now, it might have been a small moment. Maybe it was like, hey, you felt really good because you did something and it felt great. You accomplished some task. You made somebody smile, whatever, but you did. So looking back and realizing that it is, it's the possibility. It's recognizing that it is doable. It is possible. You can live this way.
Yeah. And I think one of the mindsets that I like to have is kind of like the seed and the tree. Like in each acorn, there exists a giant oak tree. And so it's this idea that whatever I want in life, and in this instance, we're talking about self-love, is the tree. But that acorn I have right now, and I can become that thing that I want. So with self-love, knowing that it's already within me, it may be on a small scale right now, but it's something that I can develop over time because the acorn doesn't turn into a tree overnight.
Oh, what I like about that too is when Aristotle talks about virtue, he says human beings are neither good nor evil by nature, right? But they have the propensity to be either. Within them, they have the power to be either good or evil. It's up to them. And I like that because that applies to everything, right? If you want to have self-love, you have that ability. If you hate yourself, you have the ability to love yourself. It's always the case, right? With whatever we do, we have the ability to switch to the other side. It's within our power, but the thing is, it's within our power. No one can make you love yourself. No one can make you succeed. No one can make you virtuous but you alone. And I think this is why I think they all go together. Because, with loving yourself, you start to realize your own power, your own confidence, your own positivity. You realize that from yourself, you can do these things. And I think that's crucial.
Yeah. And no matter how long you've been going down a road you don't want to go down, you always have the choice right now to change that.
Oh, yeah, you absolutely do. It's amazing. You look at stories, in the past, even in my own life, I struggled with addiction for a very long time. But I changed it. You know, and it was hard, really hard, but I did, and like, things are so much better, and they will be. You know, I think that's the important thing. Like, it's never too late to change. It's never too late to start. We say that all the time, but it's true. You know, if you do it now, things are going to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll have a better quality life. So we talked about a lot of really good things, I think, already with respect to developing self-love, what it is, what it means. What else would you suggest as like a good recommendation? Because we've touched on a lot of really important ones, I think, that are practical and useful.
Yeah, so one thing that I do in my life for self-love is a practice I call bookending. So during the day, I get busy. I'm running around doing a whole bunch of things. Oftentimes it's hard to really predict what's going to happen during the day. But I know first thing in the morning and last thing at night, I have control over what I can do. And so I take the opportunity every day to cultivate self-love with a few practices in the morning and in the evening. So in particular for me, what that is in the morning, I do a little stretching routine while I'm making coffee. So I limber up my body during that time. And then I do some reading of some positive material. I have a sun lamp because I know sometimes I can be affected by seasonal depression. And I do some journaling, and particularly with that journaling, I do some goal setting. So my top 10 goals, I write those down every day with basically, I write them down in the present with a time frame. So that's my morning bookend. And then my evening bookend, I write down what went well. So 3 things that went well during the day, what went well, why they went well, and then how I can create more of that in the future. And then I also do the Book of Small Delights activity, painting and writing a little narrative about that.
About one small delight, yeah.
Yeah. And so doing those things in the morning and in the evening help bookend my day with positivity, because I believe that your mind is basically a compilation of what goes into it. You put positive things in your mind, you're going to get positive things out of it. You put negativity in there, you're going to get negativity out of it. So I want to take all the time that I can and put more positive in there.
You know what I like about that? Not only, I love that you have names for all these little things. It's awesome. It makes it easier to remember. Yeah. And I like bookend. It's a nice way to think about it. I was thinking about, you know, books on my shelf. Mm-hmm. I also like too that, you know, what you're saying there is very proactive. You have a routine. You know, we are creatures of habit. I mean, this has been, you know, identified over how long. All animals are habitual, right? So building these habits into your day, you know, it might always be difficult at first. You might have to force yourself, but like any habit, it becomes easier. Whether it's working out, dieting, whatever you're doing, it becomes easier over time. It becomes part of your day, an important part. And this is a crucial part because it's about positivity, reinforcing that mindset. And you're right, what you put in, you will get out, right? If you put in good things, you will get good things out. And I like that because all of those are very active. You've scheduled them for the morning where you're taking action right at the outset to wake yourself up, to focus on physical health, mental health, right at the beginning of the day. And that is crucial because you're setting yourself up for success, right? You're listing your goals. You're telling yourself, what do I want that will make my life fulfilling and how do I get it? And then at the end of the day, you're kind of celebrating the day. You know, you're celebrating, what did I accomplish? My delight, right? You're doing all these things that reinforce that morning routine. That's a really nice schedule.
Yeah. And also I wanna emphasize about these things is that all of these things that I do are things that I read about or heard about that somebody suggested, and I just said, why don't I try it?
Yeah.
And that's the really important thing, is that I didn't know that they would work. Some of them I still don't even know if it has a benefit.
Yeah.
But I said, why don't I try it? And I gotta say, with a lot of these, the benefit that I've gotten from them is so much better than anything I could have imagined. But it's going in with that expectancy of, why don't I try it? Worst thing that happens is I won't do it after a week or a month or whatever.
Yeah, you know what's funny too? What I like about that is, look, I know from your routine, I know for a fact that there's at least probably 5 books represented where you got those ideas from. Mm-hmm. I know the Small Delights, I know the Morning Pages. I mean, like, so what I like about that is, you know, any of these self-help books, any self-help routine works for an individual. And I always thought about this with philosophy, right? A lot of times to find your own ethics, your own morality, your own philosophy, you have to cherry pick from others to find what works for you as a unique individual. And then from those cherry picking, you then ultimately make it your own. You create it into your own routine, your own process over time. And I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. You know, trying any of these is going to be valuable because it'll give you some insight into what might work for you. You might stick with some forever. You might modify them. You might abandon some. That's okay. As long as you're trying them, you're incorporating, you're taking action, you're building self-love and a more positive outlook. And I think that's really crucial. It's cool because it makes it unique, right?
Yeah. And also, you know, I want to bring this back to what you brought up earlier of just noticing what's going on. So maybe it's too much to incorporate a bookending practice into your life right now. But instead of doing that, just notice what you're doing at the beginning and the end of your day right now. Because guaranteed that's going to set you up. Whatever you start doing in your day, that's how your day is going to turn out. They say if you can win the first hour, you win the day. And then whatever you're doing last thing before you're going to sleep, your mind is still doing that while you're sleeping. So even before you take the time to bookend your day, notice what you're doing right now because that's creating who you are going to be.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. You know, one practice I really like too is before I go to sleep, I like practicing meditation before I go to sleep, particularly because it relaxes me. It relaxes my mind. I find I have better sleep. And one of the routines, we've talked about this before, you know, one of my favorite ones is just noticing the thoughts that come, letting them go, and then returning to those later to think about them. Think about what's on my mind. Before bed, that's not always the best practice because obviously you're going to sleep. Before bed, I like to practice where I pretend that I'm breathing in good energy and exhaling bad. I find it very soothing and relaxing, so you concentrate on your breathing, you sort of counting often helps, and you just imagine that you're taking in the good and releasing the bad from the day. And it kind of puts you in a nice state for sleep. But see, I think what we're talking about here is taking action to be more aware, more understanding of yourself, and more understanding of your needs by asking, how can I, right? To get to that point where you start to build a self that you love, right? Because self-love is also about creating the self that you love. It's not just about loving yourself automatically, right? Just, you know, everything about yourself. There was things in my past that I didn't like about myself, but the thing about self-love is you can create a self that you do love, and all those things, they fit in eventually, right? And they can be interpreted in a positive light eventually.
Dude, sometimes I feel like we're sharing the same brainwaves when you're sitting in this car recording this stuff, because literally I was just thinking about that same exact thing. How like you need to create the person that you want to be. And part of self-love, like another self-love practice that I wanted to touch on was when you were talking about meditation before going to sleep. One of my self-love practices is that when I am exhausted, to actually take a little bit of time and put on a yoga nidra thing on YouTube and listen to that and just allow myself to fall asleep for 10 minutes or half hour or whatever it is. And that just like knocks me out, but I wake up totally rejuvenated. But also in the light of that, I'm getting exhausted because I'm so adamantly pursuing the life of my dreams that it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so like doing both of those at the same time, becoming exhausted, pursuing the life you want, but also loving yourself and allowing yourself to relax once you become exhausted.
You know, I think that's so critical because, you know, one of the things I noticed when I was struggling, when I'm really depressed or really struggling, I notice I get especially angry with myself when I'm tired because I'm exhausted. I think I'm not doing enough, and I start to get really negative. And one of the most empowering things I found was allowing myself to rest, right? Recognizing that, hey, I'm stressed, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm overworked. For whatever reason, it might be that mentally I'm not yet in a good place and I'm wearing myself out all day with negative energy. It might be that I'm working really hard towards my goals and I'm just exhausted. But realizing that what you need, I mean, this is crucial for self-love, right? It's taking care of yourself, your mental and physical health. It's understanding, what do I need to be healthy, right? Mm-hmm. To love myself, because again, it's self-creation. And I think that is so important.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, I think this relaxing is something that's so difficult. And I want to bring something to your attention. So there's something in computer called a buffer, which is basically a to-do list. All right. And so how that works in computing is your computer can only handle so many processes at a time. So it has to create a to-do list of the things to do next. And so human brain, being pretty much a computer, works the same way. But we never really had a buffer until probably about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because before then, you just couldn't do that much stuff.
No, you couldn't.
Like boredom was a part of daily life. You know, You had some hobbies that you could do. You had school, you had television, but in between that, there was all this dead space.
Yeah.
And it just wouldn't get filled up. Nowadays, there's no more dead space. It's all getting filled with social media, with demands, with email, with all this stuff.
With noise.
With noise. We have a giant buffer, and you really need to consciously take the time in order to create the silences in your life and to rest deeply.
You know, I love you mentioned that too. I was just thinking about that. It is so funny. So yeah, all the noise in our life from technology, you know, I remember when we were younger, we had all this downtime that we had to fill. And what I loved about that was you recognized you were bored and you asked, what can I do? You took action, right? Because you had this time, you identified it, and instead of just sitting there, you went out and did something. But now it's like, it's not relaxing to just sit and scroll through social media. Especially right now, holy crap, it makes you angry. You see all this stuff about politics, all this stuff about other people doing all this blah, blah, blah. And it just makes you angry, but people treat that as downtime, and it's not. It's noise, it's distraction. You know, I think resting is really, truly resting. You know, it's shutting off everything, right? Giving yourself time to rejuvenate because you need it. And I think this is important because we've kind of lost our ability to be proactive, to take action, because we fill up all this downtime with BS that doesn't do anything, right? And it's all passive it's all passive leisure, that's what they call it, right? Binge watching TV, you know, all this shit, it's all just passive activity.
Yeah. So taking the time to do that. So self-love practices. I think we've named some pretty good practices.
I think we have, yeah. And you know, I think about, you know, light creation too. Self-love is about that, and I think I want to go back to understanding real quick, because I think understanding is so critical, understanding who you are. And a lot of what we struggle with too, I think, in self-love, it is that misinterpretation. We're looking at a world and trying to define ourselves against the world. And we use examples from outside and try to apply them to ourselves, but it doesn't work. Because we're not that person. We're not that thing. Or maybe the practice doesn't work for us. You know, we talk a lot about making your routine unique. Taking these little tools, these little ideas, and tweaking them so they work for you perfectly. And a lot of that requires a lot of self-knowledge and self-understanding. So I think one thing you can do to gain self-love is to really sort of put in practice anything you can to sort of better understand yourself. Try new things, explore the world, explore different possibilities, and try not to evaluate yourself based on the external. Use yourself as your own guide. Are you doing better than you were in the past? Have you improved against your old self? Because that is the way to create yourself. You're creating a new you, right? It's an overcoming of the old self, and it's a creation or a birth of the new. And I think that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, what you said there is crucial. Focus on the action, not on the results. So you want to make sure that you're held accountable for the action, for taking the actions that are going to improve your life. The results will take care of themselves. I guarantee it. You put in the work, the results will take care of themselves. And another thing I'd like to add to that is to look at something that's sustainable. So, it could be the way that we're programmed. It could just be a sign of the times. But we're so used to going overboard into things. Like we know that physical fitness is important. So we'll sign up at the gym and then we'll say, I'm going to go 2 hours a day every day, and quit in a week because it's too much. You know, whereas we could just say, I know physical fitness is important. I'm going to do one action every day, whether it's walking for 5 minutes, doing a push-up, going to the gym, whatever that is, but doing something that's sustainable. And I think that was the idea behind my bookending practices when I did them, is because really they take about 15 minutes. And I know no matter what's going on in my day, even if I'm already in bed about to go to sleep and I forget, I can get back up and I can do that. 15 minutes is something I can always add to my day.
I'm glad you mentioned that because, you know, we talked about this before, but it's making things possible, right? It's setting yourself up for success. Because part of self-love and part of self-hate is that constant affirmation that we're failing. One way to start overcoming that is to succeed, but to plan for success. You know, if I'm going to start working out, I'm not going to imagine I'm going to have a six-pack in a month. It just isn't going to happen. I worked out a lot when I was in graduate school for like 2 years. It is hard as hell. And even if you do get it, it's hard to maintain, right? So it's understanding what is possible and setting the tasks so that they're achievable. You can always do more. But once you succeed at these things, you realize the power of it and the power of your own activity. I mean, we have the ability to control what we do and what we think. And we have that ability, but so often we don't use it. And I think part of like small tasks and planning correctly for your goals is setting yourself up to recognize your own power, to recognize your own capacity to exist in the world and to realize yourself in the world.
Yeah. So I think we've named a whole bunch of different things that you can do. And, you know, we've given you a whole bunch of ideas, but I hope one day I'm quoted for this, that the road to mediocrity is paved in good ideas. Because ideas really are worthless. Like,
Yeah.
Everything we said today is really worthless unless you actually take the action to make a difference, to change your life, to do something different. And really, your life will change once you take action. So I'd really like to encourage you guys, especially all of you listeners out there who maybe this is your first time, or maybe you've listened to us a whole bunch already. Actually, find something that you're going to do and take an action consistently. Do it for a week, for 7 days. Do one action consistently to change your life, to become a better friend to yourself, to love yourself more.
Yeah, pick one thing. You know, the small delights thing is great because it takes literally like 5 minutes.
And it's life-changing.
Yeah, it is. It is life-changing. It's awesome.
So how do they do that again?
Okay, so the way that small delights work is the important thing is to start becoming aware of small delights, small pleasures in your life. And these are little things. It could be, you know, the way the leaves swirl in the wind. It's windy out right now.
This morning I was having a cup of coffee with my my blue light. And just the way that the vapor was coming off of the coffee and the blue light behind it, it was crazy because it was a black coffee. The room was dark, but the swirling was blue. And that it's just recognizing little moments like this.
Yeah, it's recognizing these small moments and then either carry a journal on you or at the end of the day, you pick one small delight and you write it down. Whether you had one that day or many, you pick one. You write down what the delight was, why it was delightful. I try to write like a little paragraph. So like what happened, why was it delightful, why did I love it, you know, and I date it. And that's it. But what I notice is as soon as you start doing this, you will start becoming more consciously aware of the small delights and small pleasures in your life. And there are a ton. And, you know, they're aesthetic, they're sounds, they're everything in the world can be delightful. And when we allow ourselves to start doing this, we realize that, you know, our negativity was really a false interpretation. That we were distracting ourselves. We were causing ourselves to consciously miss things in the world, right? That were pleasurable.
Well, our brain is developed to notice the negative things because that's how we survived as a species.
Yeah.
Like, if you were just busy sunbathing all day, you would have gotten eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, or you would have died in the ice age, you know? You wouldn't have survived. So our brain, it's useful for survival for our brains to be able to pick out the negative. But remember, it's a computer that we can train to pick out the positive, and then it's going to be able to pick out so much more positive.
Absolutely, and that is a great one. If you do anything, try it. It's so simple, it takes no time, you know, and it can really improve your life. And the other thing I would like to, you know, especially leave you guys with is take yourselves less seriously. Learn to laugh at yourself. And not in a self, you know, defeating way, but learn to laugh at yourself in the sense like, look, we all fail. We all make mistakes. We all plan to succeed way too fast. We all, you know, see these goals as being, you know, we all think we're going to be happy when we get X, and it isn't the case because we haven't worked on ourselves. So learn to laugh at yourself.
Yeah, it could be an exercise at the end of the day, just like, how was I a goober today?
Yeah, right.
You know?
I mean, I can easily find some of my small delights are me laughing at myself because it's something dumb I did, you know, or something I thought. And I think it's a great way to start, you know, taking ourselves so seriously is one of our major problems. We're on social media all the time. We see all these examples of all this stuff, and we think we have to be these rigid individuals. You have to, you know, be this ideal. But I was saying to Randy earlier, you know, all these great philosophers that talked about these ideals of the good life, these ideals of the good person, they were ideals. They were things to work on and work towards forever, your whole life. They didn't think they were going to be perfectly just, perfectly temperate all the time. The idea was to do it as much as you can, to get to the point where that's most of the time.
Yeah. Well, Danny, I think that was an excellent episode today.
It was an awesome episode.
Yeah, I learned a lot. I'm definitely going to be listening to it again this week.
Damn right, so will I.
Yeah, self-love, very important habit.
It is. Learn to be your own best friend, right? I think that's crucial right now. We're alone a lot. Get to know yourself better.
Yeah, but notice, I mean, the vocabulary you speak with defines your world, but notice the two words we just said. Learn that habit and learn.
Yeah.
So it's something that you can learn and it's a habit. So you totally have the power to create this in your life. Self-love is something that you can do. It's possible in your lifetime. So
absolutely. It is all possible. Do it. Start with something small. Keep at it for a week. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe, click notifications, like, whatever you can do. We really appreciate it, and we'll be back next week for episode 18.
All right, see you next week.
See you next week, Randy.
Bye.